Welcome back. I'm Randy Bueller. I'm back. I won my match, feeling pretty good. Joined by Luis Scott Vargas.
Yeah, that was a. We have not had close matches yet.
The second game felt kind of close. I mean, it was essentially a top deck.
Yeah, the second game came out of top decks, and then Chris drew, deal 25 damage for two
Oh my
white
god.
white, essentially. In game one, you missed a bunch of land drops, but then Chris just didn't do anything.
I
So
could not believe that I won game one. And then, yeah, I felt like I was winning game two the whole time. So those
yeah,
sort of weirdly cancel out.
yeah. So, but this match should be interesting. The Delver deck Tom's playing is a little bit metagamed against decks like Steve's, like not his specific deck because obviously we didn't
Yep.
know about that deck exactly, but with Cabal Therapy, Norod, and Thoughtseize are just really good in this matchup.
Yeah, the Null Rod in particular. If it's
Oh
only
yeah, that
one Null Rod for Tom, but if he draws it, it
yeah
is the most powerful card in the format against Steve's deck.
yeah. Norod is the card that Steve's deck wants to play against the least. Yeah, like you said in the format.
Well, I guess so. Where are we now? Tiebreaker scenario wise, we can still get a 7-way tie. Is that right?
We can get a 7-way tie if Tom wins this, and then Dave loses and Rich loses. Then it's a clean cut to top four.
Yeah, we can still have clean cuts. We can still have 7-way ties. You, I'm sure, are rooting. You got a
Oh,
rooting interest in this match, huh?
I have to. I have to root for Tom, right? Because then I'm first seed.
Absolutely,
So,
100%.
well, Tom. Yeah, Tom's opening hand would lead me to believe that it's looking good.
Oh, is that right? You can see opening hands. I'm actually
looks
having
like
trouble.
looks like we're about to go to the match soon here.
Yeah, I think we're having some issues with the hand cam, and I can't actually see anything right now, unfortunately.
All right. Well, let's if Tom loses here, then we're completely live for the huge tie.
Yep.
But it still require basically all the huge tie lines still require Rich and Dave to lose.
Well, can't we get a pretty big tie at 5 and 4?
Uh,
Yeah, we can get a 4-way tie for third.
oh,
We
that's
can get a
true.
we can get a
There's a
5-way
lot of
tie.
tie implications here.
Yeah, no, we can get a 5-way tie for third. The real question is whether the line for the playoffs is going to be 5-4 or 4-5. Right now, if the next time a 4 and 4 wins, if a 4 and 4 wins, then the line moves up to 5 and 4. But we can still have as many as 5 people tied there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, looks like one of our hand cams is having issues, and I'm also having issues. I wonder if we can't just take a real quick break and let me relaunch Skype in an effort to and then buy a couple minutes to see if we can get the second hand cam online. We're going pretty quick this week, so yeah, we're gonna hop to the be right back screen. We should just be a minute, and then at a worst case scenario, LSV and I will chat a little more. But we'll be right back. Please stay
That is
tuned.
the worst case scenario.
Awesome, we're back, and we're no longer blind, so that's good.
Yeah, and we were discussing a little bit more in the chat about kind of like what the playoffs were looking like and how many land I drew in my first match.
Yeah, I managed to. Yeah, how many land I drew? Yeah, your draws were like your draws against me. They were just terrible.
Yeah, the two losses I had to you and Ifra were not particularly close. My match against Rich was pretty good. The one I lost to him, like I can't complain. Like I had decent draws and he had better ones, but like that, it was a matchup I thought was in his favor. So
am I
good?
Go. No, I was just going to switch to talking about me. It's okay.
No, I was just wondering. I don't know what my matchup against the Vault deck is actually like, since the games I played, I didn't really have a ton to work with. But
yeah,
we're gonna see. I guess we're gonna see the Vault deck play a couple more matches tonight, including this one, which is a little different. I expect Tom to be favored against Steve.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. But yeah, my match, I definitely I know people were asking Chris about having in the Devout Witness. I expected him to bring in the Devout Witness. Just being able to block my creatures and attack and block. It is this like weird dorky little creature fight the way that matchup plays out. So I for one was not surprised by that, just because he has cards that don't really do much in the matchup.
Yeah, he has enough. He has enough bad stuff to bring out that it didn't shock me. I mean, it's not like
right.
People look at
it's not
like
good. I mean,
yeah, of course,
it's Gray Ogre basically.
People look at some sideboarding and think like, wow, this card's like a 4 out of 10. Why did you bring it in? It's like, well, I have 1 out of 10s in my deck. So,
yeah, exactly. And I had one Null Rod against him, which I think felt right because he has engineered explosives, which can be very good in the matchup, and he has more moxes than me. So I went down to 1 Null Rod. My sideboard's pretty easy. I just bring in the 2 creature removal spells I have and call it good. I don't know. Do you think I was supposed to play against this Moat threat in Game 2? I felt like it's a one of. I know Moat is game over if it ever resolves, but
yeah, but I especially like he knew you had days, right? So he did. He's never running into it. So I don't think you're supposed to like play just for the one of Moat. I think you actually lose more games long run if you always play around Moat.
That's what I thought too. Well, that was just one of the ones I lose. Got away with it though for Game 3. All right, sounds like our players are ready. Let's get down to Tom Martell versus Steve Menendian. Tom is trying to win to make the postseason one way or the other. I'm going to call it make playoffs if he's in a tie for a playoff spot. Menendian is playing to clinch a tie for the 1 seed and force a tiebreaker game against you.
Yeah, and Tom's hand is much stronger than Steve's. I saw his hand 5 minutes ago.
Oh, okay.
But Ancestral Double Misstep Delver or Cabal Therapy Time Walk, like this is the kind of efficient hand that really gives Delver an advantage in this matchup.
Jeez, you are.
All Tom's spells cost 1 or 0 mana, with the exception of Time Walk, which is obviously a very efficient card in itself. And he doesn't need much mana to operate, and he gets to cast all his spells. Whereas, all Tom's spells work pretty much by themselves. Cabal Therapy is a slight exception. Whereas Steve, has cards like Goblin Welder and Mana Vault and Mox Opal that really need other help to work.
Yeah, he can't even play the Welder until he turns the Opal on.
Yeah. Though Tom can run into problems here. He's got an Ancestral in his hand. Steve has the Misdirection.
Surely he leads with Delver.
I would imagine so, especially since getting to try to flip Delver, get an extra attack in, and also find cards like Gataxian Probe to turn on this Cabal Therapy seem pretty useful.
Agreed.
Looks like Tom is not going to do that though. This is going to be a 2 for 2 because Tom can misstep his own Ancestral.
Exactly, but he's going to have to misstep his own Ancestral.
Yeah, I like leading with Delver there. I don't think you're in a hurry to Ancestral, especially when you have Cabal Therapy in your hand.
I agree. And it's Mr. Misdirection.
Yeah, Steve always has the Misdirection. He's misdirected more things in this tournament than anyone else.
Yeah.
Mostly Ancestrals.
Yeah. Yeah, Tom's going to be forced to misstep his own Ancestral with the line he's set up.
Again, it's a 2 for 2, but Tom went from, I think, pretty far ahead to, like, not that far ahead just because...
Yeah, if you just lead with Delver, then maybe this happens later, but...
You also just have a Delver in play.
Yeah, and maybe he forces the Delver, right?
Yeah, I don't think Steve's going to force the Delver. I think there are matchups where you would, but Steve's deck is pretty much a fast combo deck. It's not a blue control deck as much. Like, it's kind of a hybrid, but it's, I think, more on the combo spectrum. Enough that he would probably just let it resolve.
Yeah, I agree with you. But still.
Cards like that, Time Spiral being the example of that. Though I imagine Tom's going to misstep the Mana Vault here. it just seems like denying Steve access to fast mana, especially when he has lots of Mox Opals in his deck. Does he have the full 4?
Some of these do. I don't know if Steve actually does. The different deck lists differ on that point.
Yeah,
I would definitely misstep Mana Vault, though.
He has 2, but it's still worth misstepping, I think.
Totally agree.
Steve's deck is also full of these like expensive, really good, like powerful cards.
Precisely. Yeah, even if you ignore the Mox Opal implications, I just think Mana Vault's a good card for him on turn 1, especially on turn 1.
So Tom's optimal involves like Gitaxian Probe into a block source, I guess.
Now, do you play Delver or Time Walk here?
I would probably just play the Delver. I would obviously I would have played it turn 1, but even just playing it turn 2, you'd rather Time Walk with Delver, a flip Delver and play, than Time Walk and then play Delver and essentially cycle.
Totally agree.
Luckily for Tom, he misstepped the mana vault there. Steve can't actually cast anything else here besides his 0 drops, which he's probably not going to. He's an artifact short of turning on Mana Crypt or Mox Opal plus Mana Crypt for Time Spiral or Mox Opal for Goblin Welder.
All true.
Tom obviously looking to flip Delver, but I think he'd be fine with not flipping it and hitting on Null Rod instead.
Yeah, the 1-up Null Rod is by far the best card in Tom's deck for this matchup. Steve basically can only win with Vault Key. He can tinker. That's not quite fair. He can tinker out the Inkwell.
Yeah, Inkwell's also decent, but
you basically turn him into a tinker for Inkwell deck.
Yeah. Scalding Tarn is not actually that bad of a draw for Tom, so what he can do now is hit for 1 with Delver, cast Time Walk. Then on your upkeep, you get to look with Delver, and if it's good, keep it, and if it's bad, shuffle it away with Tarn, and then cast Cabal Therapy. You also don't really want a Cabal Therapy until you hit a Gitaxian Probe, because you're playing against a deck that they can have all sorts of things in their hand at this point.
Ultra.
I mean, there's no, like, from Tom's side of the table, there's no strong indication that Steve has any given card in hand. It's not like turn 1 when maybe you Cabal Therapy Force of Will if you're going to lead with a good play or something like that.
Delver
didn't flip,
he didn't like it.
So I imagine Tom had a land on top there. Tom's not gotten incredibly lucky this game, I don't feel like. Though I think he should be potentially 3 cards deeper, though it isn't clear that he had the opportunity to...
No, I think the misdirection play would have happened a turn later anyway.
Yeah. So I think that would have actually ended up happening. Because Tom, given that he drew Island, I don't think he's going to wait too much. Though I guess he would have gotten to Cabal Therapy and maybe name Force of Will or Misdirection.
Would he?
If you have an Ancestral, you could name Mental Misstep, but a lot of the time they're going to misstep Cabal Therapy to begin with. So
yeah,
that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, you don't have to name... Yeah, once it's resolving, the odds of them having a misstep are definitely lower.
Yeah, they're definitely not 0, but they are lower than they were initially.
Agreed.
Tom in a pretty interesting spot here too, because he has Fire Ice he can cycle, Cabal Therapy he can just run out, but Steve's just not doing anything. Tom also has got to feel like he's close to being under pressure here, because like Steve's deck is pretty explosive and Tom's not doing a whole lot. I like upkeep icing the Underground though.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
And apparently what Tom was thinking as well.
Yeah. Look at some extra cards. Raise the odds of Steve having to just pass without doing anything.
Well, Pyroblast is a nice draw, because now if Steve does end up drawing the fast mana for a Time Spiral, he's going to sink 6 mana into it and presumably get it Pyroblasted. Actually, well, I was going to say it could happen here, but he's 1 mana short. He can play the Goblin Welder, though. Not that Goblin Welder does an insane amount of work here either.
You think he should go Sapphire, Crypt, Opal, Welder? I actually like saving all that for Storm Count on your Time Spiral turn. I'm not sure Resolved Welder is... I mean, there's a Mana Vault in the graveyard. I guess you can get some mana with it next turn.
I think Steve is going to run it, but the extra flip-off Mana Crypt's not something I'm super happy about either.
Yeah, and then you do sort of give away some Storm Count, where like the best card in Steve's deck is Mind's Desire.
Yeah.
I mean, he has no way to access it, but if he thinks he can resolve a Spiral, then maybe this is better in the worlds where his Spiral gets countered.
I actually don't think the best card in Steve's deck is Mind's Zero.
No?
I think it's the best card in Ephro's deck, but Steve's not playing it.
What?
Yeah, it looked great in the deck.
That's
I mean,
insane.
I've been
I remember hearing that now, and I remember it not making any sense to me last time I heard that either. So
I've been kind of not a fan of this deck so far in the matches I've seen it perform, but Mind's is one of the cards I actually did like in the deck.
yeah, no, I was talking to Ari Lox about this deck at Eternal Weekend. This is basically what Ari played, and he loved the deck. And he basically said when his take on Vintage was, you want to be playing the one-sided draw 7. So there's like Necropotence, Yawgmoth's Bargain, Mind's Desire. The problem with Necro and Bargain is that you can't really run a Dark Ritual deck in a metagame
Right.
where everyone has Misstep and you want blue cards for Force of Will. So he's like, okay, fine, but at least I can run Mind's Desire. And then he played this deck, but with a Mind's Desire.
Yeah, I think the deck's soft enough against No Rod decks that it's just not a good choice. That's the main problem I have with it.
Sure.
Is that No Rod is just so good against the deck. But
definitely true.
But Mind's Desire did look pretty good. I actually really like the card Mind's Desire too. So Tom's got the worst Delver I've ever seen. Whereas Mox Ruby does not allow him to flip it here. But he can't decide whether he wants to smash into the Delver here. I don't think it's or into the Welder here. I don't think it's terrible, but you don't really want to make that trade. So your biggest concern is, does Steve have a giant artifact that he wants to resolve? Because Steve has the mana for Inkwell. You could Pyroblast the Inkwell on the stack, but with a Welder in play, that doesn't work. Yeah.
I think you attack Delver into Welder. I think Steve would be wrong to trade, therefore Tom should attack.
Well, Steve has a little more information. He knows that he's got a Time Spiral in hand.
Yeah.
I like trading because the Welder also gives Steve an out to Mana Crypt. If they trade it,
right,
you still have a clock. You still have a point and a half a turn. 3 if you're higher than that if you're lucky. A point and a half basically.
Right. Tom thinking about this.
Yeah, I mean this is a tough spot. It would be a lot easier if the Delver just flipped.
Yes.
I mean, Tom also has the option of casting Cabal Therapy here. But again, I don't really like doing that. This is Steve's big turn. He's got, Tom to 1 counter to Steve's 1 card, but if Steve draws something that's like some kind of action here, then he can actually, resolve it. And jeez, that's action.
Yeah, that counts.
The thing Steve is, I'm sure, aware of, and Tom is too, is that at any point if Tom draws No Rod or Treasure Cruise, then Treasure Cruise mainly be to find No Rod or counterspells, then the game is so much harder for Steve. Like, imagine a No Rod in play, and none of Steve's cards would do anything.
There's not any Welder top shenanigans, right?
The same things do work.
Does it? The Welder isn't an exchange that requires the artifact to still be in play?
You tap the top, then in response weld it out, and you switch artifacts, then you draw a card. So you end up a card, but then your top's in the graveyard, then next turn you weld it back in and start using it.
That makes sense. So you do essentially get a cantrip off the Welder, but you can't flip the top onto the deck and expect the Welder to resolve. All right, well, Steve's going to spin the top. Let's see what's there.
Like a good place to start, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Top one of the better cards Steve could draw.
Recall, Misdirection, and a Fetch are the 3 cards he's looking at.
So, from the sounds of that, Steve would tap the top to draw a card, Ancestral. Tom, I presumably Pyroblast it, and then Steve can weld in Mana Vault and cast Time Spiral if he wants. I mean that is a line of play that ends up with him resolving a Time Spiral this turn.
Yeah, I was trying to see how the mana works, and if the Welder lets the mana work.
You end up shuffling away your top, but if you're resolving Time Spiral, presumably you can do good things, and that's with a lot of mana in play. Tom doesn't hate a resolved Time Spiral either. I wonder if Steve goes for Time Spiral, and then if Tom Pyroblasts it, then goes for Ancestral.
Funny.
If the last card is blue, Steve could also go for Time Spiral. If it gets Pyroblasted, tap top, draw Ancestral, and Misdirection. So he could hope that, I guess, 1 card down. No, he knows the top 3. So yeah, he needs the 3rd card to be blue to set that up exactly. But starting with Ancestral probably still lets you resolve Time Spiral, in most circumstances here. But unfortunately, the main mistake that we've done here is we've let Steve Menendian get his hand on a Sensei's Divining Top. So, and for that we must suffer.
Funny.
I mean, Top's a tough card to play with. There's a reason it got banned and extended, and that was not that it was too good. Though it was probably also too good. It was because it made tournaments take too long. So I can't blame Steve fully for this. I mean, this is all sorts of players have trouble topping. I mean, I know I've spent probably too much time doing it myself. So I don't know how aggressively Steve plays this deck. It seems like the kind of deck you want to play aggressively.
Agreed.
So I imagine that he would want to just go for some line of play involving either Spiral or Ancestral this turn, potentially both. And I imagine Tom's going to Pyroblast whichever the first one that comes up. There's a non-zero chance that Tom just lets Time Spiral resolve, figuring that he might use them like the cards better because Steve's only untapping 2 lands, doesn't have an Academy.
Yeah, I think Steve will use the Ancestral as the bait, and Tom can't let that happen.
Yeah, I imagine Tom will Pyroblast Ancestral. It seems hard to walk away from that.
Come on, Steve.
He's getting there. He's got the cards in order now, so at least he knows that. Steve's hand's been so low this game that Cabal Therapy is not shown. I think it's pretty good, if it shows up a little earlier, like because Tom didn't draw an Underground Sea till turn 3 or 4. But it's also a lot better with Cataxian Probe, obviously. Like
yep.
Tom was never in a position, or Young Pyromancer. If Tom had drawn a Pyromancer, he would have thrown out the Therapy. So looks like Steve is going for it here.
Yep. Flip the top.
And it has to be Ancestral first, right?
Oh, is he gonna do the Welder trick here?
Yeah, it looks like if he's going to go for it anyway, he might as well just get an extra card into his hand.
Oh, yeah, that totally makes sense. Now you wind up with the mana crypt in play instead of in the graveyard. Totally makes sense. And draws the Ancestral. He's got 7 mana, or 7? 3?
Yeah, 7. So he's got Ancestral plus Time Spiral here. I don't know how confident Steve is if he's Time Spirals here. I mean, his Welder's already tapped.
Right.
He hasn't played a land yet. He'll have 3 mana having not played a land.
3 mana, 2 mana. He's going to Ancestral first.
Sorry, 2 mana, having not played a land.
Yeah.
3 mana, assuming he finds, I guess, a normal land that is not Academy. And then he has to try to go broken, or Tom gets to untap and, with 7 cards and a lot of mana for the Delver deck. The Delver deck does not need a ton to work with.
This is what his deck is designed to do. I don't understand how you would decline the opportunity to Spiral here.
Seems unlikely. Also, if you pass the turn here for some reason, you put yourself in a position where if Tom draws a way to remove Welder, you've just lost your top. Which, I mean, I think he did want to weld out top there, but you are always taking a risk whenever you end up with top in your graveyard and a tapped Welder.
All right, here's the Ancestral. Tom will immediately Pyroblast it.
If Steve doesn't Time Spiral here, Tom could also just strip it out of his hand with Cabal Therapy. I mean, not that Tom's going to hit automatically, but what if Tom draws a Cataxian Probe or a Young Pyromancer where he gets to take a blind shot, then a called shot?
Right.
There we go.
Go for it.
That's what we were all hoping for, obviously.
Yeah, we got there.
Honestly, this is not a one-sided draw 7. This is very much, let's restart the game with Steve having a lot more mana than Tom, but Tom having a deck that requires cheaper spells.
It's not actually that much more mana in terms of the untapped mana.
Well, he drew Academy
and Inkwell.
Yeah, with this direction backup. He's just going to resolve Inkwell.
Can totally resolve Inkwell. What does Tom have? Nothing.
So even though Steve's, I think, going to resolve Inkwell this turn, Tom can legitimately, threaten to outrace it with Young Pyromancer.
That is the game now, isn't it? It's Inkwell racing against Young Pyromancer. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Tom runs into more problems if he gushes in response to Inkwell looking for a counter. Because if he does that and then doesn't draw literal 2 counters off the gush, then he ends up having a lot less mana to try to go off with Pyromancer on his turn. I guess Steve can't quite Inkwell this turn, is that correct? He has 5, 6, 7 mana? 8? Yeah, 9 off the Mox Opal. So yeah, Mox Opal actually does get him there.
Just has to remember to keep the untapped one. Or does he even
Yeah.
need it? He's got 9 already?
No, he didn't have any
He
mana
didn't have
floating.
anything floating. But he
So
can
look,
play the Opal.
but he has 9 off the Opal.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't get an extra one off the Academy. He plays the Opal. He just has to sack the pedal. Tap the Academy first, then sack the pedal. Play the Opal. Keep the untapped one. It all adds up to 9.
Yep. Yeah. That was a good time spiral for Steve. That is what the plan is, I suppose.
Yeah, the time spiral is also defense against any treasure cruises that Tom might draw. Like it reshuffles Tom's graveyard, so there's a little extra value there. We see
It's
Tom spiral
true,
into a treasure cruise, which he has
but
no fuel for.
you also gave Tom 7 cards.
Granted, but I mean, you got 7 cards. It's just, I think that both the Twister and the Spiral go up a little bit in Treasure Cruise
Yeah.
world.
So Tom has a pretty tough decision here. He can try to look for a counter, which he's got a decent amount of. He's got Forces and Pyroblasts. Pyroblast obviously not working once it's in play. But if he lets it resolve and goes Pyromancer, Gush, Treasure Cruise, Ponder, Bolt, he actually could end up in a spot where he can legitimately outrace it. I think he is going to go for the Gush, but
Yeah, I think. Wow. Yeah.
which is I think correct given Tom's hand, but unfortunately, it's not going to work out quite as well.
Would you Gush there? Or would you just let Inkwell resolve?
I think you Gush. It's tough, but like Steve only has 3 cards, so obviously he could have Force or Misdirection, but you have to just kind of not worry about that. And you're drawing to like 6 outs to counter Inkwell, because it's not like you automatically win if you Pyromancer here, whereas you could do pretty well if you kill the Inkwell.
Well, I mean, it feels like you have to look ahead and see how the Pyromancer math actually works out.
Yeah.
Like, you can take 2 Inkwell hits. Can you kill him in 2 attacks?
You have to flip Delver, hit him to 15, Pyromancer.
Make a bunch of guys. It seems like you can deal 15 in 2 turns, and he can't.
True.
I mean, maybe you can anyway, but I don't think so.
There's a mana crypt there. You also have to decide now whether you bolt the Welder end of turn or do you wait.
Sure. Well, he floated a blue mana.
Yeah, because he had just a basic island. I think you probably bolt end of turn. You're just going to be so constrained on mana now, like that you'd rather bolt and then untap and go Welder or Pyromancer, Ponder, untap, and then maybe be able to at that point Treasure Cruise. You don't really want to sack the fetch because that's an extra turn. You're also really looking for Time Walk. You presumably are in good shape if you ever can find a Time Walk.
That's certainly true.
Steve has a pretty good chance of going for Misdirection here.
Misdirect the Bolt?
Yeah, Tom has the Misdirection, so it's not that big of a deal, but if you're Steve, I mean, you for sure do.
Yeah, you misdirect here. Hey, how good is that Inkwell Leviathan metagame choice against Dak Faden?
Very good. I mean, that I think was the right choice. If you're going to go for a giant Tinker target, I think Inkwell is the one you wanted.
It's because of Dak Faden's ability to steal it.
Yep, and because it's immunity to like Ancient Grudge and Trigon Predator. Not that Colossus isn't also immune to those things, but it's just additional protection. Also immune to Jace, which is another thing the Colossus is vulnerable to.
All right, Steve does pitch for Misdirection. Tom has to Misdirection here. This is a turn. This is a Time Walk essentially.
It's more than that. You need the Welder. You need the Delver to hit. Like you need the Delver to flip first of all. Something he has been unsuccessful so far. So Tom's going to let Steve's Misdirection resolve, then he's going to presumably misdirect back. Oh, Steve decided whether he wants to change it to Tom or to Delver. Actually, changing it to Tom is even better, I think.
Yeah, I think you pulled Tom. I wouldn't even consider the Delver here.
Yeah.
That's why I was calling it a Time Walk.
Yeah.
15 versus 12 is a big difference when you're attacking with a 7-11. He chose Tom. Now Tom has to decide whether to Misdirection back, which it sure seems like he should.
The question is whether you picked Dak Faden, Mental Misstep, or Treasure Cruise. I actually think it might be Treasure Cruise. It actually could be Misstep here. Steve only has one card in hand.
It could be misstep.
So this next turn, you're going to go Pyromancer Ponder. Then the turn after that, you can go Dak Treasure Cruise. And that sees you so many cards that you might be able to find Time Walk in that.
Yeah,
or enough bolts.
Will fuel Dax Plus does a pretty good job of fueling the Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, that's part of the reason that it's in the deck. Well, Tinker Protection, though, in the metagame of Inkwell, that does not actually do that. And a way to fulfill Treasure Cruise. All right, so
we both think Redirect Bolt back, pitching the Misstep.
I like pitching Misstep the most here, I think. But I could see an argument for pitching Treasure Cruise. I think Dak, I haven't actually counted out, but you're going to have 2, 3, 4 cards in your graveyard. Yeah, I think Dak's a little bit better than Treasure Cruise, maybe. Though I guess if they cost the same, Treasure Cruise sees one additional card and gets another token. So maybe pitching Dak is better if you're on the page of not pitching Mental Misstep. I think Ponder is the least likely card to want to pitch.
Yeah. Misstep, paying 2 life for Misstep is also super scary, again, with 14 being 1 life above 2 Leviathan hits.
It's also worth going back and noting that had Tom not gushed, he may have bolted end of turn anyway, in which case misdirection would have happened, in which case Tom would have had to gush, looking for his own misdirection, which he would have found, or Force of Will.
Yeah, that's fair.
Looks like Dak is getting pitched here. He was hovering over it for a second. Dak's such a great thief that he can even redirect Lightning Bolt.
All right. Down goes Welder.
It was a winding way, but it eventually found its way back to the Welder.
Now let's see if that Delver can flip.
Steve's also on air here.
Yep.
And he has a Mana Crypt, so Tom has a very realistic chance of winning this game.
Yeah, no, I agree. He'd be, like we said, he'd be in better shape if he had a couple more land and he could make more Pyromancer tokens this turn. But I believe you're right. He would have had to gush anyway. I don't think that actually turns out to matter.
Tom needs to win a couple coin flips here. One is to flip Delver. The other is for Steve to miss on his Mana Crypt flip. Delver has flipped. Revealing, well, Fluster Storm maybe not the most relevant of cards, but
not the most proactive thing. He's not going to do a great job of making Pyromancer tokens with a Misstep and a Fluster Storm.
So Tom is also fully on the Steve can't draw anything or have anything plan, which I think is where you have to be facing that unequal Leviathan.
Yeah, well, let's race.
I mean, if Tom finds a Time Walk, he wins the race easily, I imagine. If he doesn't find a Time Walk, does he hit Steve down to 15?
What is that? Probe and
some artifacts. Looks like, Mox or Lotus, something like that. Probe is probably not going to do it. Because you're not really in a position to even be able to pay the life.
Right. You're doing it next turn. You may as well reshuffle at that point, right? If that was just artifact mana. Yeah.
Fire Ice. Can't tap Leviathan, but let's say Tom doesn't draw a Time Walk. He hits Steve down to 15. Steve has a Mana Crypt flip. Probably going to pay for the Mana Vault, though. And then Steve attacks you into 8, and then next turn... Does Tom just win this race on the board? Because next turn he attacks Steve down to 9, and then has fire him down to 7, and attack for 7. Even if Steve wins all the Mana Crypt flips?
I think you're right.
Wow. Yeah. That is the disadvantage to Inkwell. I mean, had it been a Blightsteel, Dak would have taken it, so it's not completely fair, but imagine Tom didn't have the Dak. It would have finished the game much faster than Inkwell.
I still think Tom would be better off with a Dak in his hand instead of a Misstep, but it does not look like it actually matters. And he just lost a flip, didn't he?
He lost the flip and he bricked, so Steve actually has to draw gas this next turn to win. Otherwise, he loses the race just straight on the board without even the flips, or Tom casting a single spell.
And it's not like Steve can draw a Lightning Bolt for that last point of damage.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, his actual gas draws are like draw 7s.
Tom can, though. If Tom draws Lightning Bolt and then attacks, and then Steve loses the Mana Crypt flip, Tom can just bolt Steve to death.
Tom drew a Delver. So
I don't actually know if you want to play the Delver, because you're hitting with everything.
Right, which is half his life total.
Yeah.
Delver means that Leviathan on defense doesn't beat you, but Fire means that...
That's already true if you just go end of turn, fire you, make a token, attack with everything. The only reason to keep the Delver is if you anticipate hard casting Mental Misstep, then hard casting Fire Ice, then casting Flusterstorm. But I don't think Flusterstorm is going to do a great job here. Anyway, so Steve needs to hit something. I mean, he's got one draw step here. If he loses the flip, then even a draw 7 is not the best because, yep, he lost the flip. Now if he draw 7s, Tom into Lightning Bolt.
Right. Top deck says Orsa will. Not going to get it done. Wow. So Steve got off his Time Spiral.
He resolved
able
Time
to resolve
Spiral.
an Inkwell Leviathan.
Yeah.
Not good enough.
He resolved Welder, resolved Time Spiral, then resolved Inkwell, and Tom just outraced him with Delver and Pyromancer. This matchup cannot be good for Steve.
Wow. Yeah, if he can't win this game, he's in trouble. And the Inkwell still seemed like the right choice. I mean, it could win 2 hits, but versus Dak Faden, there's no target.
Had he gotten Blightsteel, he would have immediately just lost this game.
What if it's Sphinx of the Steel win?
It can't get Dacked because it's protection. That's actually interesting. Sphinx would have won him the game.
Sphinx would have won in the game. It would have got to attack 3 times because it has haste.
It doesn't have haste, but it has a lifelink.
Oh, lifelink, sure. Yeah.
So it would have gotten infinite attacks.
Thank you. Yeah, Sphinx of the Steel win would have got there where Inkwell didn't. Does he have a Sphinx in his sideboard? Some of these decks have access to both. I know Rich has like one in the main and the other one in the board.
Steve, in fact, got the deck list here, does not have any more Tinker targets in the sideboard unless you count Grafdigger's Cage or Nile Spellbomb.
I do not. I've definitely seen Sphinx. I may be remembering some of the Eternal Weekend deck lists, but I've definitely seen Sphinx starting to come in because it is protected from Dak.
Yeah, I mean, all I did this weekend is watch Eternal coverage, the Eternal Weekend coverage, and I saw Sphinx of the Steel Win in play at one point. So
yeah. The problem with Sphinx of the Steel Win is that it gets just totally blown out by Jace.
Yes,
does not have protection from blue. So Inkwell is the best one against the combination. If you want to guard against both Jace and Dak, then Inkwell does seem like the right one.
Yeah, there's no way to cover all your bases. That's the interesting thing. I think that's good because that leads to variety.
Totally agree. There's like 4 viable Tinker targets. We've even seen Mirror Battlesphere.
Yeah, that one I'm a little less a fan of because it's kind of slow and still kind of loses to some of the same things. Though it has like half immunity to some of these things. It's actually kind of funny.
Yeah, no, there's 4. I think there's four different Tinker giant robots that you can make a case for.
So the list I sent Tom had a Vamp Tutor in the main deck to get No Rod and a second No Rod in the sideboard. He's moved away from that, which I think is unfortunate in this particular matchup. But he still has Cabal Therapy, Notion Thief, Red Blast, Wasteland, and Mindbreak Trap as all viable options here.
That's a good set. Do you bring in Cage versus Tinker at all?
Nah, I don't think so. I think you have enough counter magic that you'd rather just deal with it that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And as we saw, you can race. It's not as lethal of a Tinker.
Who cares? Tinker's not a problem.
Yeah.
Apparently.
So, I do think that Tom wants to go down in the number of Lightning Bolts. I mean, Goblin Welder's a thing. You have a Fire Ice. Maybe you just hope that that's enough.
Yeah, Fire Ice.
It's possible Dak Faden goes out too, given that Dak. It's like it can kill one of Steve's mana sources, but it can't take any of his big things.
Yep.
Maybe killing a vault or a time vault or Voltaic Key that's in play is good enough, but I don't know. It's also not absurd to go down on the number of go down a Pyromancer because this is such a fast matchup that is unlikely to be removing your Pyromancers.
Sure.
Like Steve does have Toxic Deluge in his sideboard though.
Let's look at Steve's list. Lots and lots of 1-ofs. He's going to have to bring in some way to kill a Null Rod.
Yeah, I imagine Ancient Grudge is the best at that because it's not as resistant to counter magic as Shattering Spree, but getting it to flash it back means it could potentially deal... It's basically, you have to counter it twice, and it can deal with... Well, I guess Tom only has the one Null Rod, but often those decks have... Steve has a Null Rod in his sideboard?
That is bizarre. I did not see that.
What is he bringing that in against? Does he, I guess, siding out 30 cards when he does that?
I mean,
there's got to be a very specific reason for that. I'm going to trust Steve's judgment and say that he's got a particular matchup in mind that cannot win when you have No Rod in play. I don't know what that matchup is, but it has to exist.
Does he turn himself into a Tinker deck in the mirror? I don't know.
Oh, no, I think this is a transcription error. He does not have a null rod in his sideboard on the Google Docs, which makes so much more sense because that's the best card in the entire format.
Great, that does make way more sense.
Okay, good.
It's like, I mean, he didn't put a Mind's Desire in the main deck. Maybe this deck is his kryptonite somehow. But see what happens in game 2. I do share your inclination to trust Steve's judgment. That was what I was struggling with. I'm glad to hear transcription error. We can all be right.
Yeah, I mean, I was it was blowing my mind that there would be a null rod in Steve's sideboard. So I'm glad to see that is not the case.
The Ingot Chewer Tom brought in.
Yeah, I don't love Ingot Chewer. I think you can do better than that. I don't think you have room to bring in all the artifact hate, and I think there are better types of Ingot Chewer. So Steve has Sensei's Dividing Top, which is, I think, a pretty strong card in this matchup. He might actually want to protect it from Misstep and lead with Preordain. But, I mean, he's going to play one of those two cards. I don't think he plays Mana Vault on turn 1. I don't think that ends up working out. Steve has the Little Scene Transmute artifact.
He's been making a comeback. I saw a bunch of that this weekend at Eternal.
Yeah. About, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, David Ochoa was like, this card might be great. And he actually bought a bunch of Transmute artifacts. I wonder if he still has them.
You've been sitting on them all this time?
Well, they never took off is the thing. Like they
might be taking off right now.
They could be. I mean, I have no idea what the scarcity is, but it's not a card that there's a lot of. So it's certainly more popular now than it has been at other points.
Yeah, we even saw some in Legacy at Eternal Weekend.
I was watching the Helmerator deck.
Helmerator. That deck was pretty cool.
It does, yeah. It looked like there's some cool stuff going on. Steve firing off the Preordain, which is a good mental misstep test. Most people will mental misstep Preordain. Also, maybe I'm making my top 4 chances a little lower here, but please, people, stop mental misstepping Gitaxian Probe. That is just not a play you should make in normal circumstances.
Agreed. That's where my line is. Like, I'm pretty fast with the missteps, but I'm not misstepping a probe.
Yeah. So, Steve found a Mox, which makes this hand much more explosive.
Oh, wow.
Because now he gets to go top, Opal, and either use top or play Mana Vault. If Tom draws No Rod, I guess he can't have Pyroblast backup on turn 1. I'm just trying to play. Every time I think of what would happen if a No Rod just got plopped into play, that's just not pretty. Well, Steve's got lots of mana here.
Mm-hmm. I go ahead and spin the top main phase, or is he? Yeah, okay.
Wait, what's going on?
What?
Oh, he preordained. He knew the top card was Ancestral. Yeah, wow. Okay. Wow, that was a sick preordain, founding Mox Ancestral. Tom has all the cards to fight it if he got to take a turn, but he has not gotten to take a turn yet.
A Pearl, too?
Steve's storm count's pretty high now.
Pearl, replay the top, or Mana Vault?
I would imagine you just play the top still.
Yeah, it's a fresh library, too. You might actually, with that much mana, you probably spin the top upkeep.
Yeah.
Next turn's draw phase.
Yeah, you're not constrained on mana pretty much at all at this point. Steve's expanded his mana base significantly. Doesn't have any action besides Transmute, which is getting close to being able to do something. You still have to pay the mana difference, so if he sacrificed the Mana Vault, he would be able to tinker out Inkwell, assuming he could pay 8. So I don't know the exact rules text of it. I think if you select something and can't pay for it, it just fizzles. Not that Steve would do that, but I'm just curious with what the... I guess that's what happens. You reveal it.
You can get it into the graveyard. It is...
Yeah. But it doesn't come into play, so you can't just get a Sundering Titan. Not that Steve has Sundering Titan, but I vaguely recall people talking about that, but I don't think it works.
Yeah, I think it doesn't work. I know, though, that if you don't pay, the thing you got winds up in the graveyard.
So Tom really wanted to find a blue card there, because now he has Pyroblast, but Sapphire is strangely worse than Ruby this one particular instance. And Steve has a force of will. So if Steve draws something big, Tom can't fight him off of it.
And here he is spinning the top in his upkeep, just like we suggested. Set up his draw phase. He needs some gas, but he's seen a lot of cards. He's kind of due some gas at this point.
I'm trying to think of what broken thing Steve's gonna do and lose to Delver.
Yeah.
Tom's in a worse position now. He doesn't have a Delver in play, and he has 2 lands instead of 4, and Steve's at 19 instead of 15 without a mana crypt. So it's a little different, but this is not that different from the situation we were in last game. Well,
he found a tinker.
And Tom is, again, still a red mana away from being able to stop it. So looks like we are going to see an Inkwell coming up pretty soon here. And this time, Tom does not have the clock or the Pyromancer in hand.
I mean, there's some chance that Steve only has a jar to go get. I don't know how he feels. I would think he likes Inkwell in this matchup. But I mean, a lot of times with this deck, you think of the primary target as being the memory jar because you're a draw 7 deck.
Right.
And Inkwell is kind of the backup plan. That said, on this board, I think Inkwell is.
I haven't seen very many memory jars in play. I've seen more Inkwells in play. That's maybe just be how the games went, but or what the people playing the deck prioritized. But the deck also hasn't resolved a lot of tinkers because it's so far it's not done so well. When you're resolving tinker, you tend to do better. If Steve's thinking this long, I would say that means he might not have Inkwell, but it could just mean he's not sure if he wants Inkwell or jar. He has so much mana that jar might just be better. Yeah, Tom's Kingdom for a blue card there instead of the Scalding Tarn he drew. Yep. Or if the Mox was a ruby, that would have also worked. Looks like we're just going for the Tinker straight up here.
Yeah, he's going to sack the Pearl instead of the Mana Vault. Guess he wants the Mana Vault around for a future Transmute artifact if he needs that. He can't Tinker and Transmute for Vault plus Key, can he?
I was looking at that. He doesn't have enough blue unless he has another source of blue somewhere. So Tom's going to go for the Pyroblast, which is not going to work out.
Yeah, and then Steve's going to be forced to pitch his Transmute, but you do what you got to do. He definitely wants that Tinker to resolve. I would think this Force of Will takes away any thought of Vault plus Key.
Yeah, presumably.
It's just on the Inkwell plan now.
Tom's Ingot Tour not looking great here. Steve considering not forcing this? No, that can't be. Okay. I guess he could consider spinning top and looking for a different blue card. So it is possible that he would rather sandbag the transmute, but I'd rather just do this and then just get to like top and then crack fetch.
Yeah, he knows what the top 2 are. Remember, he spun top on the upkeep.
Yeah.
Drew the Tinker. For whatever it's worth. He may actively not want to shuffle. Because he's got something on top for next turn. Although that doesn't make with Tinker that he's reshuffling anyway.
This is going to be an uphill battle for Tom. I mean, he's got a sequence of draws that races Inkwell, but it's pretty slim.
It's not even interested.
He came to that same conclusion.
Yeah, you can't race Inkwell from there. All right, we're going to see game 3. Big game. We get to figure out whether, I see the audience rooting for the 7-way tie. This match determines whether the massive tie is a 4-5 tie to root for or a 5-4 tie to root for. You get a tie to root for the last couple rounds either way.
Yeah.
It's just a question of which one.
I would rather there not be a tie for first.
Yes, your rooting interests are crystal clear. If Steve Menendian wins this game 3, then he forces a tiebreaker game with Luis for the 1 seed. If Tom wins this game, then he clinches a postseason spot for himself. So definitely a big game all the way around.
Yeah, at the very least a play-in postseason spot.
Right, exactly.
Which is good considering he started 0-3. he's.
Oh wow, you're right. Forgot about that.
Yeah, so.
Seems
Tom,
like a long time ago.
Yeah, it was. I mean, he's gone 4-1 since then. So.
Yeah, and Tom actually with a loss here, he hasn't even clinched to not last.
That's true.
It is still possible for 4-5 to be the worst record in the league.
The division between each placing is just not very not very big. Steve's playing for tied for first or tied for potentially 6th.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. Who do you like in game 3? You like Tom's deck better in this matchup, you've decided?
I think Tom has the advantage in the matchup, and I think Tom being on the play turns on a lot of his cards, like Pyroblast, Cabal Therapy, Thoughtseize, cards that we didn't really see get going that game. Like, I mean, had Tom been on the play that game, Steve would not have been able to resolve nearly as many things.
Yep, I agree on both counts. Let's see what happens. Game 3 between Tom Martell and Steve Menendian. Huge playoff implications for both of these guys and pretty much everybody else in the league.
Yeah.
Wow, we've still yet to eliminate a single player from playoff contention. That is insane. There's like 2.5 matches left in the season, and all 10 players are in playoff contention.
So Tom has his best card. He has Null-Rod, and he's gonna resolve it on turn 1.
But it's gonna cost him 2 boxes.
It's just worth it still. I mean, he's gonna ponder first. Yeah, so
ponder first. Agreed.
He's not completely shut off of card selection, and Steve's presumably going to get to cast an Ancestral here, but Steve's hand is super broken.
It would be broken if there wasn't a Null-Rod in play. Black Lotus turned off. Lotus Petal turned off. Memory Jar turned off.
Tinker not quite dead. So Tom's looking at a Cabal Therapy, Thoughtseize, Young, Pyromancer. I don't think you can keep that. I think it's playing Eternal Null-Rod just makes so many of Steve's broken opening hands just do nothing. That though you actually no, you can because you have a fetch land, so you can actually just
draw one. You can draw one and crack fetch land.
If Tom has a lot of ways to play this. He can keep just the Thoughtseize and go Underground Sea Thoughtseize, not playing a turn 1 Null-Rod.
Oh my!
And saving it for turn 2, or he can just play the Null-Rod.
Wow. I mean, seeing Steve's hand, obviously Tom's best play is to play the Null-Rod, but Tom doesn't know that.
Yeah, and he might think that a turn 1 Thoughtseize is enough, but
right.
But I think that Steve's deck is capable of so many explosive starts. I would just slam Null-Rod on turn 1. His biggest concern is whether it gets Force of Will. That's what the Thoughtseize is there to protect.
Right. Yeah, he has no defense against Force of Will. Wow, that is a tough call.
Yeah, I actually don't know what's correct here.
Right. It's hard to see it without knowing that. We know the hand. It's hard to forget that part. Well, I guess he's slamming it because he drew the Pyromancer, not the Thoughtseize. So he's going to get Volcanic, and then he's going to Null-Rod and hope it resolves.
I think that's the plan.
Yeah, I like it.
Oh no, he's going to play a Pyromancer turn 1.
Ooh.
Well, I don't like that. I think if you don't Thoughtseize turn 1, I mean, I guess Tom doesn't know how broken Steve's deck is, but if you don't Thoughtseize turn 1, I think you're Null-Rodding turn 1.
Well, let's see what happens. How much of that can Steve resolve?
Well, he can he can Ancestral, and then when it resolves, Tinker. But I think that he's gonna run that. I think it's worth. What you can do is you can cast Tinker, and if Tom has a Force of Will, you can respond to Ancestral to look for your own Force of Will. But if you don't, then you don't want to draw Inkwell off of your Tinker here.
Oh yeah, that's what he's done. He's going to Tinker first. And Tom is like, why didn't I play a Null-Rod?
Yeah, I don't think that you. I mean, Steve's deck is so soft to Null-Rod and has so many potential. Like, did you see what happened last game? Like he just went off last game.
Yep. Maybe Tom's got a young Pyro. He thinks he can outrace Inkwell.
Yeah, it's not 0% that Tom gets to outrace Inkwell here.
Right. He's even got a Gush. He's got a Lightning Bolt.
Tom needs to draw a land because he can't currently cast Gush.
Precisely, yeah, and it's a freshly shuffled library because he cracked the fetch land after that Ponder.
Steve's hands have been pretty insane. Now he has Force of Will too.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I think Steve's actually almost assuredly going to win this. I mean, Tom has to draw a really impressive sequence of cards.
Probe's a good start.
Yeah.
He needs to probe into a land for the Gush is what he needs to do.
And now he can't cast this Null-Rod. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah, no, the Null-Rod play, it's too late for Null-Rod. That window is gone. So hard to play a turn 1 Null-Rod when you have 2 Moxes in your draw.
Yeah.
And you can't see their hand. I mean, I've certainly felt that from the merfolk side of things. You have the Sapphire, which is like the best card in your entire deck. It can be hard to turn it off, but it's in your deck for a reason. It hurts the other guy more. You just kind of have to trust.
Yeah, and I mean, Tom putting himself on 1 mana is also
Uh-oh. Here's your favorite play.
Well, here actually, like,
yeah?
Here I don't think it's as bad because you don't want to give Tom information about what's in your hand because you have a super fast clock out. You're not going to play this. This game's not going to last much longer.
Okay.
And with a Pyromancer in play, you want to trade cards. You want Tom to have as few options as possible.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. The information is valuable, and the card being something that could potentially make another young Pyromancer token is not really what you want to have happen. Wow.
Yeah, so the thing is, if Tom had like a good broken hand, he could still potentially outrace Inkwell, but given that he doesn't and Steve has a Forcible, I think it's going to be tough, because now Tom's not likely to be able to resolve something, say Time Walk, which is one of the cards that would help him win this game. Steve also can just vamp for Time Walk.
Oh, wow, sure. Probably will. Tom should like bolt Steve's face, end step, make another token.
Yeah, for sure has to start by doing that.
And then he just hopes to draw an island to gush with.
Yeah, Tom's outs basically are draw island, gush, have Steve not force gush, because he probably shouldn't, and then Tom draw Time Walk Pyroblast, and run together wins based on that. Well, Preordain kind of fits in that whole paradigm.
Sure. Now, Steve can't force this.
I don't think so. It seems like that's a bit much. So Tom finding 2 land, probably gonna keep one of them, I would imagine.
Top to bottom, I would think.
You could bottom both and just hope to draw land, but that's probably not wise.
Why? What's the advantage of doing that? Your deck is infinitesimally denser.
Yeah, it doesn't make that much sense.
All right. Draws the volcanic.
So if Tom draws Time Walk Pyroblast, what happens here? Time Walk goes up to 6 power, Pyroblast goes to 7 power, attacks Steve down to 10. Yeah, Tom has to draw Time Walk Pyroblast or Time Walk Flusterstorm, and then draw like a Lightning Bolt on his turn, I guess, on his Time Walk turn.
So and this is all assuming that Steve is going to Vampiric for Time Walk. If he can counter the Time Walk, it's actually not the end of the world either. Right? I mean, if Tom counters Steve's Time Walk, he gets another turn.
Yeah. And
that's all assuming that Steve does, in fact, Vampiric for Time Walk.
Also that Steve doesn't force the gush here.
Also true. Yeah, if Steve forces the gush, then vamps for Time Walk, that line just wins.
Tom has to get very lucky on this gush to win.
Yeah. I mean, Steve doesn't know Tom's hand, obviously. Yeah, you let gush resolve. You got to force a will and a blue card.
Yeah, but it's not the right... The problem is that's not enough because Steve has his own force.
True.
So Tom's still technically not out. He can play Dak Faden and plus it and draw 2.
That's crazy. He doesn't know Time Walk's about to happen. He thinks he's got a turn left after this one.
Yeah, I like using Dak here. So now Tom's outs are mental misstep blue card, and he has to mental misstep the Vampiric Tutor. No, that doesn't even work because then Steve forces and Tom forces going to 7 and dies to the Inkwell. No, he can. He's got no islands in play. He can actually block with one of the tokens and go to 1.
Ah, that's awesome. Inkwell does have trample, but yeah, soaking up a damage.
And he found it.
What? He found the force in the misstep. Wow.
So it's not guaranteed that Tom still lives here because it's not necessarily wrong for Tom to let Vampiric resolve. I think you probably want to misstep it because the obvious card is Time Walk. But if Tom doesn't misstep the Vampiric, he could end up in a spot where he does actually still die to this line of play.
Well, Tom's discard to Dak is pretty straightforward. It's the Null Rod and one of the 2 volcanic islands.
Yeah, for sure. Tom's got outs
Now-
here. If he missteps Vamp, Steve forces, you force, Steve draws nothing because he has to pitch the preordain, and then you DAC into Time Walk. Lightning Bolt.
Let's see what happens. Steve's end step.
Lightning Bolt Lightning Bolt does it too, I think. Tom actually's got a shot here. It starts by mental misstepping Vampiric Tutor. If you don't do that, then you're not in good shape.
Well, here's the Vampiric Tutor from Steve.
You've got to mental misstep it, right? Because it
Doesn't look like he did. I see Steve's library open.
That's... Yeah, I guess Tom is now dead. Because Steve just draws Time Walk.
Yeah, Steve draws Time Walk.
And then Tom forces, then Steve
forces back.
Yep. Oh man, that would have almost been an insane comeback too.
Yes. To outrace Inkwell twice.
And this was like a turn 1 Inkwell too.
Yes.
Well, this was an insane game.
This was an insane game, yeah. Bunch of different paths. Game could have gone in a couple of different crazy directions. But it does look like Steve Menendian is going to tie for first, force a tiebreaker against Luis. This also means, though, that Tom, he's not out of it. He fails to clinch. He fails to move the line for the playoffs up to 5-4. So 7-way ties are still live. And
yeah, we're live for all the ties.
No, we still have no one eliminated. Not one player has been eliminated from the playoffs yet.
Well,
absolutely absurd.
There we are.
Here we are. Wow. Yeah, a couple judgment calls from Tom that he might regret when he watches it back. I don't know.
I actually think that not playing the Norrod tournament was fine. I think that was probably too much us like looking at the video and seeing the hands.
It's tough to know. Yeah, I mean, at first it was like, oh my God, windmill slam, no rod. But I mean, it was definitely a judgment call rather than a mistake. I think the Thoughtseize, I don't know. I mean, Pyromancer before the Thoughtseize is also good. It's like Steve has to go broken on the very first turn for Tom to get punished for his line.
Yep, that's true.
It's definitely a defensible judgment call that Tom made there.
So I think
not misstepping the tutor is also a defensible judgment call.
Yeah, I think his reasoning being that he just had force for it, and he'd rather Steve skip his draw step. So he couldn't know Steve had everything. I mean, Steve had it all. So
Steve did have it all.
It might be that Tom should not be playing around Steve having everything. So pretty absurd match.
Yeah.
And next up, we've got Rich Shea against Bob Marr, which ought to be a pretty good one too.
Yep, we're going to take a super quick break. Thanks for hanging out with us, Luis.
No problem.
I'm sure we'll chat some more with you next week when we're playing out the tiebreaker games. Stay tuned, guys. We got 2 matches to go, and nothing has been decided. All 10 players remain in contention for the postseason. Nobody has clinched not last either. Well, sorry. All 8 players are still in contention for last place. No, 7? 7 players, sorry.
Yep.
Everything's still live. 2 matches to go. We'll be right back.